Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing the final season of one of my all-time favorite shows, BoJack Horseman. And just reflecting on this show and how much it means to me, how much it has moved me, how much it has inspired me, both as a viewer and as a writer. I've written several blog posts about this show, talking about its existential themes and various moments from the previous few seasons that have resonated with me. I've written a spec script for this show, which I've submitted to contests, and I actually placed as a quarter finalist for one of them for the script that I wrote, which I'm very proud of. And I have a bunch of BoJack Horseman merchandise. I have the 5 Funko Pops of the 5 main characters. I have the BoJack Horseman Monopoly game. I have an amazing book that I highly recommend if you're a big fan of the show called BoJack Horseman, The Art Before the Horse by Chris McDonnell. And I have a lovely poster hanging up that says "Suck a Dick, Dumb Shits," which I got when I went to the BoJack Horseman Hollywood fan art event in LA back in September 2017. And I actually met Raphael Bob Waxberg that night. It was my first time visiting LA. It was just so cool meeting him. I actually talked to him about a book he had recommended called What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky by Leslie Neka Arima. And if you're interested in hearing the details of that, you can check out episode 33 of this podcast. And this is also my second time discussing this show on this podcast. The first time was way back in episode 4, when I talked about the first 5 seasons, after season 5 had just been released in September 2018. And now here we are with the show having concluded with 6 seasons and a total of 77 episodes. And I just can't get over how much I love this show and just how incredible it is. I can't praise it enough. I can't praise the people who worked on it enough, and just the storytelling of this show, the level of detail of it in the animation and all the sight gags, and obviously the incredible writing, and my goodness, it blows me away. So truly one of my all-time favorite series, and I'll just keep gushing about it. But heading into this final season, just the final arcs for our 5 main characters, BoJack, Diane, Princess Carolyn, Todd, and Mr. Peanutbutter. And with the overall theme of this season, in particular with BoJack's past coming back to haunt him, how all of these truly terrible things he's done throughout the show, in which we as the viewers have seen him in his truly lowest points in his life, as he says, his rock bottoms, and then when he thinks he's reached his rock bottom, there's just more of a rockier bottom, and it's just so devastating and tragic, but it's just played out so beautifully, that theme of how finally, once and for all, BoJack has to face the repercussions of his actions, face everything he has done, and how is he going to deal with it in an honest way and truly change, finally, because then he's just always going to be this terrible person, since he is the anti-hero of the series. And the updated theme song, first and foremost, for this final season, obviously plays into all of those past pivotal moments that we've seen throughout the show. And that imagery of that black sky, how it's similar to the night Sarah Lynn had died in the planetarium. So heartbreaking. And then how we see a young BoJack in Horsing Around, and Herb, and New Mexico, that night with Penny, and then the thing with BoJack Kills with the heroin, and the underwater scene, and then his mother's old house in Michigan, the summer home, and then when his mother's in the nursing home, then the casket at her funeral, and then the Filbert premiere, and then the Griffith Observatory. So seeing how all of this stuff is haunting him, and how he had always talked about just moving forward, just keep moving forward in your life, but then sooner or later you can keep doing that, but that your past is going to catch up to you. And my goodness, does it for BoJack, even though at the beginning we see him in rehab. So with BoJack it's the first step though for him, finally trying to become sober. And that first episode of season 6, a horse walks into a rehab. We as the viewers, having seen all of this truly horrible stuff he's done to the people he cares about, how he's self-destructive and toxic in many ways. So when he's finally facing his past, truly facing it, and just the way this first episode is structured with going back in his memories, seeing earlier and earlier when it seems that it's the first time he's had a drink. First in horsing around to loosen himself up, then earlier in high school when he's like the nerd, but then when he drinks, he's just the life of the party. And then even earlier when he's younger and he walks in on his father with a woman in his office. And then even earlier than that, at the end of that episode, just a heartbreaking scene with BoJack and a young BoJack and his parents passed out, his dad on the chair, his mother on the couch. He takes a sip of alcohol and then young BoJack just crawls up on the couch and snuggles next to his mother. So truly heartbreaking. And then when we see him going through rehab and when he finally takes it seriously, and then when he's sober, and we see how that all plays out with that therapy horse, Dr. Champ. And then we see, though, how BoJack really is trying to pay it forward. I love the moment when he goes to visit Diane when she's in Chicago, and then when he just cleans up her apartment for her when she's just really at a low point in her life and she's depressed. And then it's this sign that, wow, he finally is changing. We see it. And then in that episode, Surprise, when he's talking to Diane and he says, you know how in AA they give you chips? And she says, but no salsa, using that. But they're a big deal, the chips. Sure, they brainwash you into thinking they're more important than they are. But when I got my 2-month chip, I thought, I wish Diane could see this. I see it. It's amazing. It would not be improved by salsa. So that she's always the one he was striving to be better for in many ways, which we have seen in previous episodes too. But then later on when he says, well, when she tells him that she's leaving LA to go live with her new boyfriend in Chicago, and she says, but the reason I had to tell you I was leaving, the reason I came to my ex-husband's house was because I need to know that you're going to be okay. I need to hear you say it. I can't leave if I don't know you're going to be okay, BoJack. I'll be okay. Promise? Because if something happens and I'm in Chicago, that's not a friendship, that's a hostage situation. Go to Chicago. I'll be fine. So Diane's arc, her final arc of the series, is absolutely wonderful. That she starts dating that bison Guy. And first off, I love that his name is Guy. I can't help but wonder in the writer's room, just them planning out the final arcs for all of the characters and talking about different stories for this last run of episodes. And then I guess maybe them saying like, okay, so we need Diane to have a new Guy. Probably they just said that so many times. And why don't we just name him Guy? I could just envision that. And I love how his name is Guy. They make all those silly jokes. I love how his ex-wife is named Lady and that his son is named Sonny. Just those simple things. I just get a kick out of that. But Diane, we see her suffering depression. And when she's trying to write her book of essays, then she's just writing over and over, I am terrible. And that's so heartbreaking to see her internalizing that. But then that whole episode when she's trying to write her book, and oh my goodness, when she's just suffering from writer's block and that she's wasting her time, that she's not good. I mean, I just felt all that. When you internalize that and you're just so frustrated with yourself trying to write and you feel like nothing good is coming out, and then she's in the episode Good Damage when she's just thinking about her past, her childhood, Mr. Peanutbutter, just all that stuff, and oh, I felt all that. And then she just ends up writing that young adult mystery book, Ivy Tran, Food Court Detective, and how we see that Guy is such a supportive boyfriend. He really is, as she says, he's the best guy. So I loved how their relationship blossomed over this final arc of episodes. It was just wonderful to see that growth. I also love the fact that, which is interesting too, that Diane went through the most physical change of all of the 5 main characters. How first she had the long hair, and then after she and Mr. Peanutbutter had gotten divorced in season 5, we see her with the short hair. Now when she's on taking her medication for antidepressants, and then she's saying, I don't want to take it, it'll make me gain weight. And then when she stops taking them at one point, she's going through withdrawal, and Guy is just there being extremely supportive, and that's wonderful to see. But then when she's taking them again, then she gains weight, and then she has the longer hair again a little bit by the end. So just that progression alone, how when she started out as this person who she feels like she's in LA and that she wants to write something great, she wants to have that connection with writing something amazing that it will connect with people, and she always felt isolated and misunderstood. And then by the end, she's comfortable. She's realized she didn't need all of that. As she says, she was grateful for it, that time in LA, but then she grows into the person she was meant to become. So I love how also when she bonds with Sonny, and how Sonny just kind of teasing her, but then realizing that he actually read and enjoyed her book and that he connected with it on some level, because she was always worried about, I went through all this damage and it's just damage, it's not good damage. So I enjoyed that progression, seeing that for Diane. Similarly with BoJack in the episode The Face of Depression, when he sees that woman Sharona, who was the makeup and hairstylist for Horsing Around, again dealing with this theme of dealing with his past. And then she says, how about one more for old time's sake, and then takes the dye out of his hair, saying how, I can't believe you've been dyeing your hair for the past 20 years. So then he has his gray hair, so for the remainder of the series. So then how he too is being, in a way, it's this sign of truthfulness and honesty, that now he's his true self. And also with Diane, how she had also said, just going back to the very first episode of the show, talking about the dad from the Brady Bunch, how he always felt that it was beneath him. So similar arc with even her saying, I'm just going to write this silly book about this food court detective. But then when Princess Carolyn pushes her, saying, I found this book fun. This is a book I would love to read to my daughter one day. And speaking of that, I love this arc for Princess Carolyn too, how now we see her with a daughter, that she's wanted this whole time throughout the entire series. And yet, as we see in The New Client, when she's struggling with motherhood, and we see all those images of all those different Princess Carolyns trying to do a million different things, how she's so exhausted. And it's perfect that her daughter is a porcupine, just unintentionally pricking you with needles. The level of care and attention in this show, fantastic. Just things like that. That episode in particular, I got choked up watching it at the very end, when she's talking to her daughter, trying to just soothe her, and then she makes her laugh. She's saying, "Isn't that right, Ruthie?" That made me tear up. Meaningful callbacks always get me. Obviously a callback to the episode Ruthie in season 4, when it was just a vision for her, and then now that vision is a reality. And it's just still though a struggle, because being a mother and her career that is so demanding, that's why it's great when then we see Todd as the nanny for Ruthie, and it's so adorable. And with Todd too, seeing him in a relationship when we meet Maud in The Face of Depression. And first off, what's fantastic is that she's actually voiced by an asexual woman. Her name is Echo Gillette. She's a YouTuber, actually. And I by chance, I saw one of her videos pop up titled, "I was in a Netflix show." And she talks about her experience working on BoJack Horseman and working with Raphael Bob Waxberg, the creator of the show, and him voice directing her. Highly recommend you check that out. It's really cool. So shout out to her. That's just really awesome. And obviously that representation, that's so important. So it's just great how really that BoJack's the one that tells her when he just kind of picks up on things when he's at the airport. She works at the Cinnabunny. Just great that she's a bunny, and some of her dialogue is great, like when she says, as Gandhi says, make the change you wish to see in the world. Goodbye, change. Good luck out there. I'll miss you. And when he says, I don't want to assume anything, but there may be an app for you. And then when we see how Todd was going to, because another arc with Todd, how he was going to call his mother because he's been estranged from his mother the entirety that we've known him in the series, after his stepdad had called him saying that his mother needed a kidney. So then when he's just about to call her, and then Maud's face pops up. So I love their relationship. I love that the names rhyme. Again, one of those things that just seems so perfect. It's so fitting. Todd and Maud. That whole scene with the marshmallow test, which brought me back to college. I remember learning about that in psychology, just the whole thing with instant gratification and kids waiting and all that stuff. And as always, the silly humor with then that guy that just walks in like as if he's Willy Wonka, but then it turns out he was just in the psych ward or whatever it was. Just so ridiculous. But just their relationship is wonderful, Todd and Maud. And then when they move in together, how Todd's really growing up then. And then the whole thing with his mother, but then by the end when he's saying how, well, I haven't had a mother in so long, I don't really need one anymore. But then they're just talking, and then, that's going to be okay because they can just get along and everything's fine, even if he doesn't need her as a mother. But just wonderful to see that resolution for him. And also, of course, with esteemed character actress Margot Martindale, she's saying, oh, so it was all just for this, starting with the whole like, it's just great. I love that as well. And I also absolutely love that, first off, when, just going back to Princess Carolyn, when Judah showed up again, I was so excited, and it was just perfect in the episode, The Kidney Stays in the Picture, with the whole assistant strike. And then when Judah shows up and the heavens open up, that was just fantastic, that scene. Like it's the second coming of Jesus. And oh my goodness, I was so excited. That was one of the things I was hoping to see, just the return of Judah. He's fantastic. I always loved the dynamic with him and Princess Carolyn. I was rooting for the two of them to get together. I was so excited. Oh my goodness. When they shook hands, I was like, yes, I was just so excited. I was like, oh my goodness, they're going to get together. I can feel it. I can't wait. He's just such a great character, so logical, and just how BoJack had said too when he goes to Princess Carolyn to give her a gift, but then realizes because also he needs a favor from her. And that scene's just funny too, though, in the face of depression, when he brings her a gift, and then just that old painting in his house, and then Princess Carolyn says, look what Uncle BoJack brought you, Ruthie. It's a 1970s pop art interpretation of the narcissist myth. How appropriate for a baby. Narcissist? I thought the painting was about me. And then when Ruthie starts walking, and then BoJack says, oh shit, it walks already? She started a few days ago. And then she starts getting emotional, and he says, it's okay, she sucks at it now, but she'll get better at it. But then the whole thing when he says, hey, my only responsibility right now is to not drink, and I'm barely getting by. You are producing a show, running a company, catering to your clients, raising a child, a Todd. You need your own Princess Carolyn to take care of you. So then how we see that Judah is her Princess Carolyn. It's so adorable how he doesn't even bat an eye when he just says, I'll watch Ruthie, when Todd wasn't able to do it. And then just that part when it's just like that domesticity of Princess Carolyn being exhausted, but then she takes little Ruthie playing with her while Judah is just sitting on the couch too. It's like they're a little family. And then the part when Judah confesses his love to Princess Carolyn, I was like squealing. I was just kind of melting inside. It was so sweet. And just in his proper way of his, just staying true to himself. When he sings, though, and his hair is down, it's just wonderful because he's always so robotic in a sense. Very calm, very logical, very just getting things done, but just always someone Princess Carolyn can always look to. And then when he sings to her, and it's just like very mechanical, but it's just so sweet. And when he says, I just want to describe the things I know, and the only thing I know is that I love you. Please believe me when I tell you, I love you, Princess Carolyn. And it was just so perfect. So I loved that so much. It was so beautiful. And then, of course, with Mr. Peanutbutter, how his relationship comes to an end with Pickles, and how they really were just kind of doomed from the start because she's young, she's still needs to live her life and do what she needs to do, and then the whole thing when she's going to be a social media manager for Joey Pogo, and when they just come to agreement that she'll sleep with someone to make it even after Mr. Peanutbutter had slept with Diane. But the part when they actually break up I find hilarious. The episode Xerox of a Xerox. First off, the fact that it's off screen, that's just great too. And then when Mr. Peanutbutter is talking to Todd and he says, Pickles and I are putting our relation on a brief hiatus at the Mo, but as soon as she returns from her work trip, excuse me, I'm receiving a text message and it appears we have broken up forever. I burst out laughing with that. I was just like, oh gosh, oh no. But it was for the best, but oh my goodness. Poor Mr. Peanutbutter. But obviously we see all the truly heavy stuff unfold with BoJack and these last few episodes in particular of the series. But first off, in the mid-season 6 finale, a quick one while he's away, which introduces us to Paige Sinclair and Maximilian Banks. And my goodness, the level of wordplay through the roof. It was kind of like, oh my goodness, watching it and just barely able to hold on to one before. It was just non-stop, all fantastic. And this show has always done that, always been fantastic with the tongue twisters and things like that. There's a great one just really in the season 6 premiere too with Princess Carolyn, as she has had so many throughout the show, when she says, "You're telling me your dumb drone drowned a tower and drowns downtown Julie Brown's dummy drumming dum-dum-dum, dousing her newly found goose down hand-me-down gown? Yes, that is exactly right. I'll be right down." But those just old-timey reporters, and how it's a great juxtaposition with just their ridiculous mannerisms, and the fact that they are really diving in deep to this absolutely tragic, dark, grim story with Sarah Lynn's death. And then, of course, when we find out that BoJack, at the time, waited 17 minutes before he called the police. And it's just so absolutely terrible, because when you realize that Sarah Lynn could have been saved, and it's so tragic and awful, and that he is living with this guilt. It just reminds me of in season 5, which is one of my, I will say, all-time favorite scenes in the entire series. In the episode Head in the Clouds, season 5, episode 10, written by Peter A. Knight, directed by Amy Winfrey. And she's directed a total of 21 episodes of this show, in fact. The last one she directed is the penultimate episode of the series, The View from Halfway Down. But first off, in Head in the Clouds, the whole scene with BoJack and Diane, that's one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. First off, because just scenes with the two of them in particular are just, for me, as I've said when I first discussed this show, that to me that is I guess I'll say it's my favorite relationship in the entire show. It's the one that is the most meaningful in many ways, the one to me that I find the most compelling. But the scene where just they get into that extremely heated argument, and it's very meta in many ways, and it's Diane calling out all of the terrible stuff BoJack has done up until this point throughout the series, when she mentions Sarah Lynn and saying, and Sarah Lynn's dead and you're still alive. And that's been really hard for you, the main character in this story. And that's just a meta commentary on the series, how BoJack shouldn't feel okay when he's saying, oh, you made me feel okay, you did that, and now I'm okay. And she's saying, I don't believe that's true, and I think you want me to tell you can be better. And then when he confesses the whole thing about what happened with Penny in New Mexico, and just how the whole time that we as the viewers were like pushing for him to be better, because with all of these terrible things, is he truly irredeemable? Is he a lost cause? Is this just a cautionary tale? Is this just, well, this is what happens when you're a terrible person, you lose everyone because that's what you get, that's the repercussions for your actions? As we see with going back to the season 6 mid-season finale, a quick one while he's away, that first off, so with those two crazy, Paige Sinclair and Maximilian Banks, another quick note, it was wild to me to find out that he is voiced by Max Greenfield, aka Schmidt from New Girl. That just kind of blew my mind a little bit, but that's funny too though, because actually Jake Johnson, who plays Nick from New Girl, he voiced if you recall, Oxnard, the meerkat accountant for Mr. Peanutbutter, when he just was always like stressing out over Mr. Peanutbutter's ridiculous things. So that's just funny. So yeah, Max Greenfield. That's awesome. But those two trying to uncover the Sarah Lynn story, just digging deeper, and then when they go to Penny. And it's a great episode that it just doesn't focus on any of the 5 main characters. It focuses on the other characters BoJack has affected in, for the most part, a negative way. How we see Kelsey Jennings, when now she's making commercials, or as they call it, immersive product placement journeys. And then we see her go to that pitch meeting, and when she's saying how a woman being a superhero, and that she says, if you're a woman and you save the day, nobody loves you. People take you for granted, or worse, they resent you. They punish you. The more powerful you are, the more they'll take your power away. And I just think if your movie is smart, you'll acknowledge that. Because when first she just pitched a safe version of a movie, and then she was just kind of disappointed in herself. And then after that meeting, then you see her smile that she's feeling good about it. And then we also see Penny when she comes back home, and then we see when she just looks at a picture of that night at prom when BoJack had went with her to her prom with that kid, Pete Repeat. And then we see him show up, and that was just so crazy seeing him. At first I was like, oh, wait a minute, Pete Repeat, Peter, as he calls himself now, just Peter, when he talks to Hollyhock and helps her with her anxiety attack. I loved that whole scene. But first when I saw him, I was like, wait, how does he not remember her? And then I'm realizing, oh, of course he doesn't. That's Hollyhock. I'm thinking of Penny. That was just funny. But also just seeing how the ripples of them having known BoJack, how it's still affecting them, like the ripples of it trickling down into each of their lives with Hollyhock, how she's just still... She's worried when she goes out to a party, wanting to drink, wanting to experience it, but then being afraid because after everything that had happened, as we saw in season 4, and then when he talks to her about what had happened that night at their prom, and then somehow I forgot that, which was just like insane, because in that episode you're just so focused on the ending with how he almost had slept with Penny, 17-year-old girl, and that forgetting that, as Peter says, that BoJack just left the girl Mackenzie, who had gotten alcohol poisoning, just like kicked them out of the car, left them at the hospital, leaving her there to die, basically. I just somehow forgot that, and when you realize, oh shit, that's really goddamn awful. So then by the end, when he tells her all that, telling Hollyhock what had happened with Penny and everything, alluding to all of that, and then you just hear like the uncertainty and anxiety in Hollyhock's voice. Who is it? Who is it? And then also this episode gives us the final fuck of the series, which is in tune with, like just in line with the overall theme of this final season of the past coming back to haunt you, when we see Gina on the set of her new show and how she's suffering from trauma after BoJack had nearly choked her to death in season 5, and after she had said then, what the fuck is wrong with you? And then now presently when trying to do a stunt, and then she just is still being haunted by it, and we keep seeing her putting her hands over her neck, and she's trying to just tell herself she's okay, but then when the co-star gets angry with her and just says, what the fuck is wrong with you? Just a shadow of her past, all of this just coming back, and that's not resolved, and they're still living with it. But then when we see BoJack trying to start over in the following episode, Intermediate Scene Study with BoJack Horseman, when then he takes that drama professor position at Wesleyan where Hollyhock goes to school, and he's saying acting is about leaving everything behind and becoming something completely new, and that's what he's trying to do himself. But also, I just also want to point out, seeing the moments of growth for BoJack too, how, for instance, going back to the face of depression, with Mr. Peanutbutter being the face of depression, and when Joey Pogo saying, oh, some people are just seem very happy, they're actually depressed, and then Mr. Peanutbutter saying, oh no, I seem very happy. But the whole scene with when they go to that museum, and then BoJack saying to him, you're going to finally have your crossover episode, to Mr. Peanutbutter, and he's getting so excited, oh my gosh, really? Oh god, is this real? Is this happening? Okay, you knock on the door here. Excuse me, are you Zachary's father? I think our adopted teens go to school together. Our adopted teens, like you said, they're in Oh, it's a crossover. They sure have been spending a lot of time together, huh, our teens? I hope they're not having SC. Excuse me, I'm just so overwhelmed. This is the best day. And then someone just said, when he's crying, and then just one of the girls says, like just watching him, says, he's the national face of depression. First off, that scene is just so pure, so wholesome. It's one of my all-time favorite interactions, probably my favorite, between BoJack and Mr. Peanutbutter. The fact that he finally gives him what he's always wanted, just something so simple, and he's just so consumed with joy. It's so pure, so adorable. I just loved that. That's just so genuinely sweet that BoJack does that for Mr. Peanutbutter. Just a simple thing like that to make him so overjoyed. But then already we see, though, going back to intermediate scene study with BoJack Horseman when he's teaching that acting class, and we already see how Hollyhock is just very much over all this. Like, yes, you're an adult at my school, like already wanting distance, and that now her opinion of him has completely changed, because she knows what happened in New Mexico, knows about this predatory behavior of his. And then we see how he's trying to start over, that this could have been theoretically the new beginning for BoJack, and it is in a way, but then that comes to an end, because then in jumping ahead to Xerox of a Xerox, when he does that whole interview with Biscuits Braxby, and of course the first one goes well, the whole thing with Sarah Lynn, how he was before he was going to say how he was going to own up to the Sarah Lynn story. And then when he decides, he pushes for a second interview, and that's when all of the horrible things he's done throughout the show, that all comes back, which just brings it all up when Paige Sinclair had talked to her, and then Biscuits Braxby just says this all deadpan. Oh, well, what about that woman you dated who had been in a coma? What about all this just stuff? What about waiting 17 minutes before you called the police when Sarah Lynn died? And then how he's saying, well, if I could talk to her mother, I would say I'm sorry. And then that's it. That's the end. And now then it becomes a commentary on cancel culture when he's saying, oh, so that's him just supposed to go away forever? And then he keeps trying to contact Hollyhock. And then by the end, when she just had given him that letter and he hadn't opened it throughout the whole episode, saying, as long as I don't open it, she's still in my life. So it's as if he already had known then. When he keeps trying to call her, keeps getting her voicemail. Then when he tries again, and then it's just disconnected, so you know she has blocked him. And then when he opens the letter and he just reads it, we don't see it as the viewers, but we just know that she's cutting him out of her life. And it's even nice for that she went and wrote a letter to him, probably just respectfully telling him that, because before she had said, we'll take it slow with their relationship, but then that's it now. This is the repercussions of his actions. So it's not so much did he deserve that as it is, well, this is what happens now. That's it. So unfortunately, that's the last we see of Hollyhock. But then we just know that she's just living her life in college. That's what's so heartbreaking, though, now that after all of that with Hollyhock, that she was just an innocent person and all this, and then she made the wise decision of just cutting BoJack out of her life. And it's just so devastating. And then, of course, that is the catalyst that leads to him relapsing. But also, I just want to point out, before getting into the last few episodes of the series, in the episode Sunk Cost and all that, that's the episode with Mr. Peanutbutter, Pickles, and Joey Pogo running Elefante, the Lazy Susans, just all that wordplay, fantastic, that whole thing. It's like, nah, she loves him. I just love all that, oh my goodness. And then the main plot with BoJack when he's still at Wesleyan and just freaking out because Charlotte had called him because the reporters had contacted Penny, so then he's freaking out. And then when he had passed out, and Todd saying, oh, you should always make sure to tell people the bad news first, because he couldn't tell them the bad news. Anyway, the fact that they are there, Todd, Princess Carolyn, and Diane, just trying to get to the bottom of what is all the terrible things he's done that these reporters are chasing. What is the story? And then they find out, of course, it's the Sarah Lynn story. But then all of the bad things he's done that we see, that they write on the whiteboard, all the stuff we've seen throughout the show, stole the D from the Hollywood sign, and then like Todd adds things, ruined my rock opera, left me in prison, and then Diane writes things like, oh, took my jacket. And then one of them is Keenan Thompson's Kia. How dare you? That is rude. But what's fascinating about that episode is that one by one, like first Todd leaves, then Diane saying, oh, you're trying to Like, you guys are talking like you want to get back on the plane, but the plane is gone and all of that. And then when she's saying, just own up to what you did, tell the truth about the Sarah Lynn story. And then we see, though, really, as always, you could boil it down to, in a way, BoJack's biggest flaw, his selfishness. All these things he's done because he's selfish, because he's, as a broken person, wanting to just feel good about himself, but then in doing so, he just doesn't do the right thing, obviously, because he's just going after his own selfish desires, selfish things that he wants, and then hurting so many people. But his students just wanting to celebrate the end of the great semester after they had all gone to see, like, the students perform. And then when he says, this was supposed to be a celebration, let me just have this one night. And I keep remembering other stuff, but at the start of this episode, when first they're saying, don't worry, BoJack, no one's going to talk to any, and then it cuts to Mr. Peanutbutter saying, reporters with questions about my good friend BoJack Horseman, I'd be delighted to talk. I love that. Okay, but going back to, apologies for jumping around, I just get caught up also in, like, things that make me laugh too. But now, going back to that scene, so then when it's fascinating to me how they're just trying to break down, like, all this terrible stuff he's done, really get to the bottom of it, and then there's that meta thing with Princess Carolyn saying, this BoJack is good, this is working, but it's so precarious. And then when he walks out on that stage, and you see Diane on the left side, and he's in the middle, and it's as if he's facing Diane. It's as if that, but he's really talking to his students. And then you see Princess Carolyn on the right side, like that's behind him, and he's talking to Diane, like the person he actually wants to be with. So in a way, it's like a love triangle, just seeing that imagery, because it's just fascinating how all of a sudden it just turned into that. Like, why are they still here? As we see when he asks Princess Carolyn that later on. So that imagery of the three of them, him talking to his students out there, and then you just see, like, Princess Carolyn and Diane just kind of looking down at times and just kind of reflecting. And then when BoJack says, as if what he actually wants to say, what he's been wanting to say, I just want to say that I've loved being here with you this year. You've shown me the type of person I didn't know I wanted to be. And this semester I got to be that person. Thank you. And then later on when he says, after Diane leaves, saying that she can't help them anymore because it's ridiculous and that she won't help them with him trying to just cover up what he's done. So then when it's just Princess Carolyn and BoJack, and BoJack says, this place was supposed to be a fresh start for me. Rehab was supposed to be a fresh start. But no matter how many starts I get, there's always the same ending. Everything falls apart and I end up alone. And Princess Carolyn says, I'm still here, BoJack. Why? I don't know. I'm a fool, I guess. And you were my first client, and one time you were drunk and you smiled at me and I said, what? And you said, I just like being in a room with you. You make rooms good. You still do. I have loved you for 25 years and I never loved anyone better. That kind of love, you only get it when you're young and stupid. I'm not going to get it again. And when I tell my daughter the story of the great love of my life, I want it to have a happy ending. Is it possible you letting me go is the happy ending? I've gone with you this far. In for a penny, in for a pound, right? Sunk cost and all that? Yeah, sunk cost. So it's just brilliant to me how just then it becomes this personal, intimate, deep, well, I'm here because I love you, and it's just so, like, heartbreaking in a way. It's just so sweet. Oh my goodness. But going back to now in these last few episodes of the show with Horny Unicorn, that leads to BoJack relapsing, and the subplot with Todd trying to impress his mom and his stepdad, and a great little exchange with him and Maud when she says, wow, got a promotion in my own apartment all in the same day. I never realized my boyfriend was butter. You're right, I am on a roll. The fact that they just click so well with their humor, their personalities, they are perfect for each other. So I just love that. It was just beautiful. Todd and Maud, love them. So, so adorable. But then just by the end of that episode, that heartbreaking thing when someone just when BoJack is at that college party, first he was like, no pictures, but then afterwards when he reads that letter from Hollyhock, he goes back in. It's like his world is ending, and you could just see it on his face, like nothing matters anymore, or like what's the point anymore, when then someone just puts a drink into his hand, and then you know that it's downhill from there. So then in the following episode, Angela. First and foremost, when I first saw that title, I was thinking to myself, who's Angela? Is this another person he has wronged in some way? I was just kind of nervous about that. And then seeing the horsing around executive, and then realizing, oh my goodness, that woman from way back in season 1 who had given that entire speech, that whole speech saying, well, if he goes, I go. No, and she's just very deadpan and just very stating like everything matter of fact. And then afterwards, in this episode, when you realize when she says how she was sure he would have called her bluff. So the entire time, how now it's another, just a heavy-hitting realization for him. Just that moment then when he realizes he could have done more to have helped Herb, because that had led to Herb. That was when they had fired Herb. Also, just the start of the episode with some classic purposely on the nose, in your face with the exposition. One of the many silly things I love about this show with its humor at the beginning. And that's the end of a sexist, fat-phobic anecdote in which I was so desperate to get out of the rain. I slept with a plus-sized woman. Hold the door. Oh, did I miss a meeting? No, Angela. We took Davy here out for a big 90s-style birthday party, it being the 90s and all. I would have come. I love the 90s, and it being them. Oh my gosh, I love that. But then, so the whole thing with her basically forcing BoJack to sign over his rights to horsing around so that it becomes a round. And that's one of those absolutely brilliant things that for a moment makes you wonder, is this something that perhaps the creator, Raphael Bob Waxberg, had thought of from the beginning? Because it just seems so perfect, like, oh, it's just around. But obviously it's something he thought of at some point, down the line. But going back to this with around and how Angela says, it's about 3 precocious orphans living without any adult supervision who learn that wisdom and guidance can be found everywhere. It's all around. And it's as if this entire thing has been building up to this. So brilliant. And then just the flames and how he was going to throw the contract he had just signed into the flames. That imagery. And then when you see that now he's drinking again, she's saying, oh, you're not fooling anyone with that water bottle, that he's drinking vodka. And then she's elderly now. She's got the cane. And then when she says, don't get old, and he says, I'll see what I can do about that. An absolutely foreboding, ominous line. Even when I first watched it, I thought, oh no, what's going to happen? I was starting to freak out a little bit. And then also when she's saying how, oh, I'm sorry we made you do the BoJack dance for the upfronts that one year. And then now when he signs away his rights to horsing around, that there goes his legacy now. So now it's just going to become around the 8-minute show with just the orphans. So now it's like, that part of his past truly is over now in this sense, in this universe. And so when he's absolutely wasted now, you see the bags under his eyes and the flames with the fireplace going. And then he's doing the BoJack, that dance, that ridiculous, stupid dance. It was another scary thing in a way to me watching that, because then I realized, I was like, oh my goodness, wait, the last time we saw him do this dance was in the Escape from LA episode, that season 2, episode 11, when he almost had slept with Penny. So that really extremely low point, pivotal moment in the series, in fact, but so terrible. So then him doing it now, and then just when he goes to take her car, and then I was thinking to myself, oh, he's going to just get into a car crash and kill himself. And then when we see him just burst through the gate, and at first I was thinking, oh, he forgot the code to his gate, but then remembering, oh, wait, his house was sold. How everything's just changing so quickly, so rapidly for him. And then even just when watching it as a viewer, obviously just, oh, wow, that's it. Things are really changing for him now. He's losing everything. His home now, he's now horsing around is over for him now. That's all ending. Like, what's he going to do now? And then when he just goes into, he's breaking and entering now into, because it's not his house anymore, just wasted, and then going through the medicine cabinet, taking pills. But then the nice stuff with that episode, in particular, the scene with Diane and Mr. Peanutbutter, and that final conversation that we see between them, how their relationship never worked to begin with, that he never understood her, And then when they are just talking openly and honestly, when she first calls him though, when she says to him, "You wrote a memoir?" "Oh yeah, I had the idea a few months ago. Then one weekend it just fell out of me. From the way people talk about writing, I always assumed it was very difficult, but it turns out it's not at all. Literally anyone can do it." Oh my goodness. I was like, ugh, yep. Great, whoever wrote that. That's just, yep, haven't heard that one before. But then later on when they're talking, just a deeper conversation, and when he wants to hear about her new relationship with Guy, and then she's saying, "When I'm with him, I feel like I'm part of an us, you know? Like every other relationship, I always felt like a me in a relationship." Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, I didn't realize I was doing that. I've always tried to be an us with people, even when I could see it wasn't a good idea. Now that I'm single, I feel like I'm finally learning how to be a me. That's great. I know there were times you would try to tell me something, and instead of listening, I just tried to fix it or convince you there wasn't a problem. I shouldn't have done that. We're all doing our best. And then later on, Diane says, "I feel like if we met each other as the people we are now, things would be totally different with us. Yeah, but if we hadn't met each other until now, we wouldn't be the people we are now." Two equally accomplished book writers. So it's just beautiful, that closure with the two of them. They both grew, and it's just so lovely and so heartwarming. And then seeing that closure too with Todd and his mother, because we didn't see it throughout the show, and then it's one of those things that you didn't realize he needed that closure. He needed to reconnect with his mother. And it's funny too, though, with Todd's stepdad Jorge, when he's talking about Todd to his mom, to Todd's mom, and then when he's saying, I think he runs a daycare, but he talks about the babies as if they're his co-workers, so it's impossible to know for sure. And then at the end, when they reunite, him and his mom, and then Margot Martindale sing, "And so you see, the circle had become complete. All the twists and turns had all been part of a beautiful tapestry, a grander mission to bring the boy and his mother together again." So fantastic. I love that. And then, of course, also the whole thing with Judah and Princess Carolyn when he confesses his love to her, and then she just smiles. And before, when she had been worrying about trying to figure out her dreams and then writing "the future I want is," and then just a blank space, and then Judah. It's just beautiful. I love that. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna get emotional with this one. The view from halfway down, the absolutely incredible and in many ways scary, yet absolutely brilliantly executed penultimate episode of the show with the whole dinner party dream. And Raphael Bob Waxberg, in fact, has said he had this idea for a while, dinner party with just people who have died. They had put it off, and then now in the final season they figure, well, now or never. Just this whole theme of mortality. It's fantastic. Written by Alison Taffel, directed by Amy Winfrey, and oh my goodness, shoot, I just remembered something. I have to go back for a second. Apologies, I'm jumping all around, but I do want to mention this real quick before I dive into this episode. I don't know how I didn't remember this. I just remembered this now. With the whole around thing, again, one of those things that seems like it was always building up to that. That reminds me that I actually somehow, I don't know how I found this, but someone did an edit of the Horse and Around theme song, making it just around. And I want to play the audio clip of it, but I'm going to highly recommend that you check it out yourself and watch it yourself. If you type in "just around" on YouTube, it'll come up, and it's just a quick little clip of the theme song with the horse edited out. And it's one of those things where within the universe of the show, of BoJack Horseman, the show, that if someone saw it then, they would think to themselves, oh, I remember this show, or they would think like, oh, it feels like something's missing, and yet if they hadn't seen it before, it just seems so seamlessly done. It's so chilling in a way. It's absolutely phenomenal. So again, I'm going to say definitely check it out yourself, because it doesn't have the same impact if you don't see it with the visuals, with just an empty space where the horse should be and just up close shots of just the three kids. But here is the audio clip of the Around theme song.
Three little orphans, 1, 2, 3, without a home or a family tree. Live with me, and now we got a new family. We're
around. So that's fantastic. Kudos to that person who edited that. That's really cool. So now going back to The View from Halfway Down, incredible episode. Phenomenal. My goodness, because it was so emotional watching that episode. By the end, I was like freaking the fuck out. Jesus. But first, I'm going to tell you that there is an absolutely fantastic article I highly, highly recommend. It's called An Oral History of How BoJack Horseman Almost Killed BoJack Horseman. The show's creators on making a trippy, death-obsessed penultimate episode by Jen Chaney. So that is on Vulture. Again, if you type that in, you'll find it. An Oral History of How BoJack Horseman Almost Killed BoJack Horseman. There's also, on a side note, a fantastic oral history of how the show got made, like when it was first picked up, just an oral history of the show itself. But this article is absolutely fantastic, featuring interviews with Raphael Bob Waxberg, with the writer, with the director, with Will Arnett. So highly recommend that. Lots of awesome behind the scenes tidbits of this episode. But just this episode was such an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. And first off, it was funny seeing Zach Braff as the butler. And that first made me think, wait, Zach Braff? And then realizing, oh my god, yeah, he did die. He died in that season 4 episode when Jessica Biel lit him on fire. So yep, he's dead in the universe of BoJack Horseman. And then seeing everyone who had died throughout the show. Beatrice, his mother. Butterscotch, his father. Corduroy Jackson, his co-star from Secretariat. Herb Kazaz, the creator of Horsin' Around. Cracker Jack, his uncle whom he's never met. Beatrice's brother. And then of course Sarah Lynn. And just when he brings the hydrangea at the beginning, and then by the end it's just growing out of control and he can't escape. So there's so much symbolism, so much fantastic imagery in this episode. It's absolutely incredible how it plays out like a play. And Raphael Bob Waxberg, in that article that I mentioned, he says how he had inspiration from a few particular plays of just people talking and things like that, just sitting around and having this dialogue. So in that whole dinner scene in particular, when they're just sitting there, and Amy Winfrey talks about how it was difficult to, just the mechanics of this episode, that she actually assigned a different animator to animate one individual character throughout that scene, because it's just them sitting around for 10 minutes or so talking and just all this really heavy stuff coming up. And it's fantastic how when things just start to hit you, that foreboding stuff, the scary stuff about it, how death is creeping in, quite literally dripping on BoJack. The whole thing with the black substance, that goo, how he can't escape that. And then when they're all talking about the highs and lows of their life, and the whole thing with Sarah Lynn, when then she's just kind of getting desperate at one point, saying, oh, I just want to know that it was all bent for something. Like, Herb, tell them that it wasn't all just meaningless, that what we do brings joy to people. And then when you see that when dinner is served, and then one by one seeing what everyone is eating and how what they're eating is related to their deaths in some way. Sarah Lynn is eating fast food, and then she makes a point to say, a low point for her, that when her mother pointed out every carb she ever ate, and then her manager leaked her nude so that she can get more ticket sales, all of that. And then you see Beatrice eating food on a tray, like from the nursing home when she had passed away. And then you see Herb eating peanuts when he was eating peanuts before he got it, because that, like, that whole thing, like, oh, he had a peanut allergy, but then he was fine, and then he just ended up getting into a car crash because he was texting and driving. And then you see Corduroy Jackson with the lemon, which he had used before he accidentally killed himself by doing the autoerotic asphyxiation. And then you see Cracker Jack, like, eating from a can. And then you see BoJack with all of those pills, and then the water bottle. At first I thought it was vodka. Then when he takes a sip, and he's saying, oh shit, that tastes like chlorine. Like, why does it taste like chlorine? And then as soon as he said that, everything clicked into place for me. I thought, oh shit, the pool. As we always see at the start of the show with the theme song. So, like, when you're realizing slowly but surely what's actually going on, oh my god, I was, like, so genuinely scared watching it. And in the back of my mind, though, I kept telling myself, I remember reading how Raphael Bob Waxberg had said that he never planned for, he always thought BoJack dying would mean too much closure, so that he never really considered that for an ending. So I was reminding myself that, but I was thinking, oh, maybe he changed his mind. I was just really freaking out, thinking, oh shit, this is the end of BoJack, that he's dead, he's dying. And also in the article, Raphael Bob Waxberg talks about how, with this whole dream panning out, that in real life, with BoJack drowning in that pool, how it's really just over the span of 30 seconds, realistically. So that's just a scary thing to think about, too, that he's dreaming all of this, all these people who have died, and that he's next. But then also with Sarah Lynn, when she's just going on, and then when someone else walks in and BoJack says, "Hi, Dad," and then it's Secretariat, and that Raphael Bob Waxberg said that was intentional too, that having something always be off in this reality, in this fever dream, in this fantasy, BoJack on the verge of death. But then, so the whole thing with when he walks in, then Sarah Lynn gets up and she takes a seat where she just sits for the remainder in that scene, just looking out at everyone as if she's a viewer herself, just watching everything, that's all her life has amounted to. That she really was a victim, a casualty in all this. That's so tragic and terrible. Poor Sarah Lynn. And it's great too how she started out young, and then by the end she is older. The writer for the episode, Alison Taffel, had said she first thought the idea of having them all like age up and down throughout it, but they only stuck with Sarah Lynn. And then they also did it with Beatrice, how then she was younger. Just, I guess, for her, the high point in her life when she's just performing. So when they go to that performance hall in the next room, Beatrice with her ribbons, and then Sarah Lynn performing Don't Stop Dancing, a callback to the Showstopper, that season 5, episode 11, which Gina had sang in that whole dream sequence. And then when Secretariat / really BoJack's dad asks him, like, hey, you want to go out for a smoke? And they're on the bridge where standing there on that bridge where Secretariat had committed suicide. That great line when he's like, oh, because I'm Secretariat, I'm also your dad for some reason. And he's talking about how he always cared about him. And it's one of those things that this is BoJack thinking that this is maybe what he's always wanted his father to say to him. And then, of course, that absolutely gorgeous poem. And the poem is in its entirety from that article. And here is the poem. The weak breeze whispers nothing. The water screams sublime. His feet shift teeter-totter. Deep breath, stand back, it's time. Toes untouched, the overpass. Soon he's water-bound. Eyes locked shut but peak to see the view from halfway down. A little wind, a summer sun, a river rich and regal. A flood of fond endorphins bring a calm that knows no equal. You're flying now. You see things much more clear than from the ground. It's all okay, it would be, were you not now halfway down. Thrashed to break from gravity, what now could you slow the drop? All I'd give for toes to touch, the safety back at top. But this is it, the deed is done, silence drowns the sound. Before I leaped, I should have seen the view from halfway down. I really should have thought about the view from halfway down. I wish I could have known about the view from halfway down. Just letting that sink in for a second. That's a beautiful poem. Just that regret and that can't be saved anymore. So then when they all just go into that dark abyss, and then when BoJack's saying, no, I'm going to wake up, and then when he's just trying, and they're saying, oh, you're not getting it, are you? No matter how much you try to fight, no one's going to save you from that pool, that he's drowning, that this is the end for him. And then when Herb's saying, there's nothing, BoJack, that's it, and there is no other side. And then when he's running saying, no, I called Diane and she saved me. Oh, goodness. So that whole final sequence of this episode really took a toll on me. Oh my gosh, but it's fantastic. But wow, it was insane. When he's rushing through the house and it's all chaotic, the goo is growing, that black unknown substance, it's coming for him. He calls Diane. You hear Diane's voice. It's her, but it doesn't quite sound like her. And he says, Diane, you're going to save me, right? I called you and you're coming to get me. BoJack, why did you call me? I live in Chicago. I can't save you. You didn't pick up. Right. It went to voicemail. Yeah. And then I went back in the pool. It's too late. What's done is done. No. There's nothing I can do, BoJack. I'm not real. None of this is. So what do I do now? BoJack, it doesn't matter. Well, if it doesn't matter, can I stay on the phone with you at least? Okay. How was your day? Good. Yeah? Yeah, my day was good. Wow. Watching that for that first time, to me, that first time watching it, it was the scariest moment of the entire show. And then when you just hear that flat line, and I was kind of like maybe hyperventilating a little bit. I was like, oh, he's dead. That's it. It's over. And then when it just went right to the next episode, I didn't have time to just stop it for a second. But then Raphael Bob Waxberg had said that originally you were to see BoJack wake up at the end, but then he went with the flat line, but that if you keep watching the credits, then you hear it beeping, coming back to life again, so that you know that he's not dead. But that moment, his final moment, that he just wants to hear Diane's voice, that he calls her to save him, but of course she can't do anything, and that, oh yeah, you didn't pick up, that this was my one last thing, and then this is it. It's over now. So watching it that first time, it was scary, it was heartbreaking, it was tragic. But then in hindsight, I'm realizing there's something so pure, there's something so honest and moving and just deeply intimate and just so powerful about that moment, that it's this Diane voice, not quite her, and just so chilling. But just when you ask your loved one, how was your day? Like, just wanting to hear you because I love you. Like, just take this pain away. Let me just focus on you, this person that I love. So it's just like a moment of calmness for him. This is the end. And then just listening to her. Wow. Absolutely fantastic. So then I'm thinking, oh, he's dead. Okay, that's whatever happens. The last episode of the show, nice while it lasted, written by Raphael Bob Waxberg. First off, it's fantastic, that song, Why the Long Face. Just a silly thing, and just like horses have a long face, just a silly thing like that is fantastic. And then seeing all of those close-up shots of the newspaper headlines, thinking that he's dead, but then panning out, so it's just like those psych out moments. And then realizing he's very much alive, that they had the trial of breaking and entering, and now he's in prison. So it's like, oh, thank God, he's not dead. He's in prison. Thank God. Finally, just, again, facing the consequences of his actions all along. So, like, when he says later on that officially he's in prison for breaking and entering, but that really he thinks it's for everything. That he had to be in prison. He had to just really clean up his act. That he had relapsed now, but now he's sober, the longest that he's ever been. And I love, first and foremost, that in prison that they are going to be performing Hedda Gabler. That is a fantastic callback to the very first episode of this show, when BoJack is doing that interview with that guy Charlie, and he's saying, well, talking about horsing around, saying, well, it's not Ibsen, because Hedda Gabler is a play by Henrik Ibsen. It's that whole thing with him talking about how horsing around may not be Ibsen, but at the end of the day, people just want to come home from a shitty day and just watch, like, after getting kicked in the urethra, people just want to just watch good people with these stories. So for me, I know people have said that this show, it takes you a little while to get into it. You got to push through those first few episodes. But Raphael Bob Waxberg has said that they intended that all along, that the show start off silly and then slowly get heavier and heavier with the content. And for me, the show honestly gripped me as a viewer, as a fan, from that very first scene, and that whole thing with getting kicked in the urethra. I was already like, oh my goodness, this is really interesting. I already was like kind of already taken by the show, already kind of like had fallen in love with the show. And then just with that, it's like, oh, what have you been doing? And then just when the theme song kicked in, I was like, oh, this is a great show. I already loved it. So for me, the show gripped me as a viewer from that moment. Honestly, I guess I'm one of the few. I just loved it from the beginning. But so the fact that they're doing how it's come full circle, he's doing Ibsen now, just leading that play, directing them, like in gonna be doing Ibsen, Hedda Gabler. I read that play in college. I read that one, and also A Doll's House by Ibsen. I just love that. I also love the fact that when he gets to just have that one night going to Princess Carolyn's wedding, even though it's really just the press wedding, but that Mr. Peanutbutter is there, loyal as ever, excited to see BoJack, and it's just so, again, so pure that after everything that has happened, Mr. Peanutbutter is there for him, will always be there for him. That's just truly a lovely thing. And when they go to the Griffith Observatory, and then he's saying, oh, just one of these, just gotta do this real quick, 15 minutes, 20 tops. And then when he unveils the the whole thing with the Hollywoo sign, saying, oh, in honor of birthday dad, and then now it's Hollywoob. So the end of the era with Hollywoo, as we've seen throughout the show, and now it's Hollywoob, and he's saying, oh, obviously I meant the D in birthday dad, and it's just fantastic. And then when first Mr. Peanutbutter is saying, I'm here for you, buddy, no matter what. Unless I see my good friend Erica and get distracted by some noteworthy aspect of her character or presentation. But BoJack, what are the odds that would? Then cuts to BoJack alone at the party. Another great callback, how Mr. Peanutbutter always abandons the +1 that he's with at any party. And another just final thing with Erica at the party, as we saw in the first episode of the show. Just always that off-screen character. That's just great. And also, fantastic character growth when BoJack goes to the table, sees honeydew, and first he's like, ugh, and then he tries it. After all that, not bad. Beautiful character growth. That's such a silly thing, but how he always disparaged honeydew. And by the way, I love honeydew. I'm going to go ahead and say I love it more than cantaloupe, in fact. It's very good, honeydew. So to anyone who doesn't like honeydew, I'm sorry, but I like honeydew. So that's just hilarious how he always shit on it. Always like, ugh, honeydew sucks. Then when he tries it, not bad. After all that, that's all it took. And what's also such a great series finale. Beautiful how a show that's always been so pushing against closure. And then with this final episode, how we get closure in a sense with the three, in many ways, the three people in BoJack's life that has impacted him the most that we've seen throughout this series. First with Todd, when Todd just says, oh, hey, BoJack, like, let's go see the fireworks. And he's saying, no, I just thought you could get away from the party. And saying, oh, thanks. And then when he's talking about the hokey pokey, as if it's some profound thing, it's like, well, you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about. And it's just so Todd, so silly, so hilarious and beautiful. And then with Todd just genuinely saying, like, they're just being grateful. They're standing on the beach, just having that nice open discussion. And then he's saying, well, it was nice while it lasted. And BoJack says, yeah, it was nice while it lasted. And then that's the end of their arc. And then just when it cuts to black, and then when it goes to Princess Carolyn and then they have their goodbye. So just this fact that the show, as I said, always against the closure, then we see this closure in a sense. It's just so brilliantly done. So then with Princess Carolyn, and when BoJack says that whole thing, oh, well, I thought if you had some kind of sitcom problem and I would help you out, getting cold feet about the wedding. And then when he's saying, well, you still would have married him anyway, she's saying, yes, of course. And then when he's saying how, oh, and when I get out, I'm going to probably need someone to manage me, look after me. When she just says, I can recommend some people. And then at the end, when she just kind of sighs and hugs him to herself, that she gets the closure she needed. That, of course, he always cared about her and that she's grateful for him, but that she's just done with that now. Now she's going to be, she has that success with her career, with her daughter, with Judah. Beautiful. Love that. And then, of course, I love that it ends with, again, I'll just say, to me, the most important relationship of this show with Diane and BoJack. How we saw it from the very beginning with the two of them talking about happiness in the first episode to now with Diane on the roof. When first she's talking about how my boyfriend at the time, and then when she reveals, when she holds up her hand, you see the wedding ring on her finger, that now she's married to Guy. And then she's talking about how I'm glad I lived in LA, but I'm not nostalgic for it. I'm glad I knew Mr. Peanutbutter, even though he's not in my life anymore. I think there are people that help you become the person that you end up being, and you can be grateful for them, even if they were never meant to be in your life forever. I'm glad I knew you too. Knew, huh? Hey, wouldn't it be funny if this was the last night we ever talked to each other? Anyway, I need to tell you, no, you don't have to, you don't need to, you don't owe me anything. No, I need to tell you thank you, and it's going to be okay, and I'm sorry, and thank you. So for the show to end on this note of gratitude, when BoJack at his lowest point, as we saw, for instance, in the season 3 finale, when he's saying everything I touch is poison and no one is better off for having known me, that now we see with these three people in his life that he had this connection with Todd, Princess Carolyn, and most importantly, Diane, that they are grateful for him. With these two in particular, that once he says that, you know that this is the last time they're ever going to see each other. So it's one of those things that really hit me, and it just hit me hard, because also has an extra layer how this is the last time we're seeing them as viewers. We're saying goodbye to all of these characters. We're saying goodbye to them, this point in their lives, this Hollywood era. Now it's Hollywoob. Just fantastic, just that subtle thing too. I love that. But then at the very end, when saying, yeah, well, what are you going to do? Life's a bitch and then you die, right? And then Diane says, sometimes life's a bitch and then you keep living. Yeah, but it's a nice night, huh? Yeah, this is nice. And they're just sitting there on the roof looking up at the clear sky. So then that imagery, first with that black sky, as we saw throughout the season with the theme song, and then by the end now with this purple clear sky, and then that song which I hadn't heard before called Mr. Blue by Catherine Feeney. And it's like that song is just filling in the gaps of the rest of that conversation, because they don't say anything else. They just stare out. They just have this one last night together. That whatever is to come next for him, when he's thinking about, new projects, what am I going to do next when he gets out of prison, when he was talking to Todd saying, what if I relapse again? Well, then you get sober again. When he was talking to Princess Carolyn saying, well, I'm going to need management for new projects because it's a new start for me. And then when he's talking to Diane and when she's thankful for him, even though now she's moved on, and you hear it in her voice. And props just to Alison Brie. I could go ahead and say she was the MVP this season with Diane, but they're all fantastic. But with that song with Mr. Blue, beautiful poignant lyrics. Mr. Blue, I told you that I love you, please believe me. And it's like just that acknowledgement, that something that I'm going to repeat when I first discussed this show back in episode 4 of this podcast. That, to me, I view it as BoJack and Diane as soulmates, that in not so many words, saying she has loved him. To me, it's always been evident that he's in love with her. You can point to so many specific things. The season 3 finale, for instance, when he's at such that low point after Sarah Lynn's funeral, and then yet he turns around and he says to Diane how she's better than just writing social media posts for celebrities, like more talented, she needs to be doing something better, so pushing her. Also in season 5 with the Halloween costume, how he was the only one to immediately get, baby Bjorn Berg. And then the whole thing with the sober chip, just so many specific, that's just like, some specific moments, but there's so many other things. So the fact that how he started out just feeling hopeless, that his legacy was a joke, that now it's all gone, all of that. And I saw the ending described as bittersweet. I didn't see it that way. I saw it as hopeful. And another great thing, there was just the final farewell from Raphael Bob Waxberg from some of the voice actors about their time on the show, and Will Arnett saying, because I always like when actors talk about their characters, since they're the ones playing the character, so they have a different interpretation from the writers sometimes. So what he had said, he always felt that BoJack is a character that in so many ways was just desperate for relief, and that by the end he got that. So him starting out, BoJack, starting out this depressed character, and having seen him in all of his extremely low points, all of this terrible stuff, and how he had to push himself this whole time to be better, for it to end on this moment of gratitude, and as with every final moment of each previous season, ending on this feeling of hope, and then with the two of them staring out and grateful for that friendship, them always having that deep emotional connection, and then just saying goodbye to all that now he's going to start anew, and then he's going to be okay, as she says, and that she's happy to have known him. And it's beautiful. So I love that it ends with the two of them just staring up, just enjoying that last night together. I will say, just on a personal note, that when I finished the series, I just had this moment of just this visceral, involuntary, emotional reaction in which I burst into tears. It had just all been building up, watching those final few episodes, and then it all hit me, and I just was crying to the point where I was making, I don't know if you had one of those cries where you make those high-pitched involuntary sounds. Like, I can't replicate it now, but it was just an emotional release, because just saying goodbye to this show, these characters, this absolutely brilliant, incredible series that I love so dearly. Again, I can't praise it enough. So thank you to everyone who has worked on this series. Absolutely incredible series, and always going back to that hope that you can change, that you can be better, that you keep on living, that you keep on going, you keep on fighting, you keep on striving, you keep on pushing yourself, and you let that hope drive you. You let that feeling keep you going, and it's just beautiful. So I cried, and I just love, beautiful show. I love this show so much. And with all of that being said, I have another BoJack Horseman story to share. It's called Nothing Unsaid, and it coincides with the final season. So without further ado, it's story time. It's strange to think how a relationship can simultaneously change, yet still carry on as it always has in the same instant. It happens when a person shows you a completely new side to themselves that splits your heart open at the seams, moving you in a way you never truly experienced before, but that you embrace with your entire being. She has that feeling now, sitting in her office, listening as Judah confesses to her in song, "I love you, Princess Carolyn." It's the most beautiful thing she's ever heard, even if the ever is implied. This personal declaration of his innermost feelings, delivered as always in his eloquent, matter-of-fact cadence. His spoken lyrics melt into her heart, and she welcomes the tender feeling they bring forth as a gentle smile lifts the corners of her mouth. It's a feeling of reassurance, as deep and as smooth as the sound of his voice, almost as if a part of her has known all along and has simply been waiting for him to tell her. Suddenly she realizes there's no longer an incomplete sentence, a blinking cursor, waiting. The future I want is, right here before her with this man, this hard-working, logical, patient, reliable, handsome man, who's not only the best assistant but the best partner she's had. He's the person she finally recognizes she's always needed. Up until now, she's always found it difficult when it came to admitting she needs people, since all she's ever known her entire life is being the one who takes care of others, who lights a fire in them whether they think they need it or not, and they always do. He strums his final notes on his guitar, and the lingering chords vibrate pleasantly all the way through her whiskers. The love she feels for him is palpable in that moment. He stares at her from where he sits on the couch, guitar in hand, soulful gaze unwavering, sincere. For the first time since she's known him, she sees herself the way he must have always seen her, in all the qualities he admires most about her. A dedicated manager, a relentless go-getter, a compassionate friend, a loving mother, a beautiful person. For the next hour she works diligently, while he assists her, the way each of them always has done and will continue to do. When 11 o'clock comes, she rises from her chair and takes her purse. He shuts his guitar case and silently follows her, closing the door behind him. Only after they're back at her apartment, and Princess Carolyn has tucked her sound-asleep daughter into her crib, does she turn to Judah, who sets down Ruthie's diaper bag. She brings a hand to his face, brushing aside a lock of his long, lovely hair he's left down, and without waiting a second longer, she steps forward with one heel and kisses him. His hands come up to rest on the small of her back, and her heart flutters. She pulls away only to say, "I love you too, Judah." He clears his throat. Yes, well, that was implied. She chuckles and lets her fingers slide into his hair. The warmth in his eyes sets her soul ablaze. "What a lovely engagement party," Maud says as she and Todd saunter into their apartment, even when Ruthie accidentally popped all of those balloons. Todd flips on the light switch, tosses his keys into a bowl, which he still can't help but marvel at every now and then. He's always thought bowls were only meant for stuff like soup or cereal or cake batter, not apartment keys. It's fascinating. "I'm just glad my favorite business partner's classic hijinks didn't ruin the celebration for the happy couple," he says. "Princess Carolyn and Judah are the second happiest couple I know." Maud turns her cheeks up in a grin, but Todd falters, turning to her. Just so there's no confusion, the first happiest couple I know is us. Oh, I thought you meant you and your beanie, Maud says, and before he can respond, she playfully tugs his yellow beanie down over his eyes. He gasps for a second before throwing his hands out in front of him and striding toward her while making monster sounds. Maud laughs and finally pulls the beanie back up. He smiles at her and she puts her hands to the back of her head. Hey, Todd? Yes, Maud? She crosses to their kitchen and opens the fridge. I was going to wait until tomorrow to surprise you, but... She takes out a box she's hidden in the back of the fridge, while Todd sits down at their kitchen counter. This is to celebrate us matching on All About That Ace a year ago. She lifts the box top to reveal a carrot-shaped cake with Happy Anniversary written in frosting. It's a chocolate cookie dough carrot cake, a little bit of everything we both love. Todd stares at the cake, at the orange frosting, admiring how bright it is, just like her. This is the best thing ever! I love it! I love you. Maud slides her hand out toward him across the counter. He meets her halfway, cups his fingers over hers. A year since he met her, and it's been the greatest year of his life. It seemed like a miracle when her face popped up on his phone, and now he can't imagine life without her. Every day they show each other how much they love one another without the need to express it with physical intimacy. It's in the looks they share, the way he makes her laugh by doing a silly dance, the way she surprises him with a note she's tucked into his pocket, the way they can talk about anything in the entire world and it all makes sense. I'm just so grateful for that horseman who told me about the app, she says, and Todd's smile slips slightly with the realization. Wait, horseman, as in my... His what? Ex-roommate? Old friend? He drops the thought. I remember you mentioning that on our first date, but I always assumed you meant a man with a hoarse voice. No, it was that horse guy, the one who used to be on TV. Huh, Todd says, drifting in thought. And as if thinking out loud now, he adds, that was really nice of him. I wish I could find a way to thank him somehow. I'm sure you will when the time is right, Maud says. She retrieves a knife from the kitchen drawer and starts to cut a slice of the cake. Todd absentmindedly watches. Hey, Maud? Yes, Todd? She pauses and looks up at him, and he sits there a moment, taking in her loving smile as she patiently waits. I've been thinking, what if we started a podcast together? Her ears perk up and her nose twitches in excitement. Ooh, our own podcast! I love that idea! Like radio, except it's just talking. Exactly, we could talk about our life as a couple and give advice. And we could call it Talking with Maud and Todd. What about the Maud and Todd Pod Squad? That's even better! It's like poetry! Maud giggles and Todd smiles again. He accepts the plate she hands him with a piece of cake, and he hums his approval as he takes a bite, savoring its delicious taste. Yes, he'll definitely have to find a way to thank him somehow. She can't remember the last time she's gotten a good night's sleep. Turns out dead silence is far more difficult to fall asleep to than the ceaseless, rhythmic sound of her roommate's light snoring. Just one more final and she can go home, put this whole school year behind her. She throws the blankets off her body and sits up, instinctively reaching for her phone. 2:18 a.m. She cradles it in both hands and stares down at the screen, which casts a pale blue glow across her tired eyes. For several minutes she just sits there, a low sigh escaping her, filling the silence in the small dorm. She looks around in the darkness, scanning the half-packed boxes. Maybe she could pack up more of her stuff, but her limbs feel too heavy to move. Her eyes land on her desk. Maybe she could go over her study cards for her last final again, but there'd be no point being this exhausted. Besides, she already knows the material inside and out. Her thumb idly presses down on her phone. She considers calling her boyfriend, but he's home in New Mexico, and she wouldn't want to wake him up and trouble him when there's really nothing for her to even trouble him about. She just can't sleep, and talking to him wouldn't help that. What would she say anyway? After all, insomnia is just part of the college experience. She considers calling home just to hear one of her dads. At least two of them are probably still up, watching late-night TV. They tell her how much they couldn't wait to see her, momentarily take her mind off of her loneliness. She opens her contacts, scrolls down. A certain name catches her eye and she pauses on it, though a pang of guilt immediately strikes her. How selfish of her to suddenly want to call her and hear her voice instead of her dad's voices. She thinks back to when she first met her, the nervousness she initially felt, the rush of tenderness that took its place when she hugged her for the first time. Then, as quickly as she gets swept up in the warm memory, an instinctive sadness creeps in at the reminder of how she'd come into contact with her in the first place. She doesn't think about him much anymore, but it definitely didn't help when the news broke about his indictment for breaking and entering, and all she saw and heard buzzing around campus, circulating on social media, was information about his personal struggles and his court case, all leading up to his prison sentence. She remembers the jarring, inexplicable guilt that had run cold through her veins, but she couldn't pinpoint why. Her boyfriend assured her it was for the best, and at the time she merely nodded, her heart numb. It wasn't that she missed him. She knows cutting him out of her life was the right decision. Maybe he was never meant to be in her life to begin with. But then, a part of her knows that isn't true either, as she reminds herself of the good he did bring her at one point in time. The anger she'd stubbornly clung to had slowly faded, and eventually there came a point where she didn't harbor any resentment or bitterness or even sympathy for him anymore. All that remained was a feeling of gratitude. After all, if it hadn't been for him, she never would have found. Her thumb presses down on the name before she can stop herself. She brings the phone to her ear. It rings once, the sound somehow dragging out to her when... Hello? She almost chickens out and hangs up, but the word slips out of her mouth, an impossibly small sound. Hi. Hollyhock, hi! The joyous surprise in her voice erases her nerves. Gosh, it's almost 2:30 in the morning in Connecticut, isn't it? It is. I can't sleep. I figured I'd try calling you since it's only an hour earlier in Minneapolis, and I know you usually work late shifts at the hospital. Your timing couldn't be better. I'm on my break now. Then her tone shifts to something more serious. A sense of urgency she can only surmise is that motherly instinct kicking in. Is everything okay? It is and it isn't, Hollyhock says, and she almost wants to groan at her ambiguous response. Maybe she's going through a late, angsty teenager phase. She wraps an arm around herself. It's been a crazy year. There's silence on the other end, and it's like she can sense her hesitance, that she wants to ask her about it, but she doesn't want to pry. Not wanting to put her in that uncomfortable position, she changes the subject. How's Hannah? Oh, she's doing great. She can practically hear her beaming with motherly pride. She keeps saying she's not ready for second grade to end because she'll miss her teacher so much. She got her best grades ever this year. That's amazing. Another beat of unsure silence on the other end. But then she seems to make her decision when she says, She actually asked about you recently. Her heart stills. She grips the phone tighter. She did? She said, Mommy, when is that pretty horse girl going to visit us again? A bashful grin finds its way to her face before she can stop it. Pretty. Tell her I'm already planning a trip to come visit again once I get home from Wesleyan. And tell her I can't wait to see her. I certainly will. She'll be so happy. Her smile widens. She involuntarily lifts her hands to her face, pressing her fingers to the diamond point between her eyes. The one tangible connection she'll always have with him for the rest of her life. She used to resent it, but now, I'd better get to bed, she hears herself say. Of course, it was wonderful to hear from you. Give my best to your dads. I will. Okay, good night, sweetheart. Happy tears fill her eyes. Good night, Henrietta. It really is a nice night. He's not just thinking that because he's been away for so long. He truly does feel it. And now, as he stares up at the night sky, vast and wide and clear and sparkling, for the first time in a very, very long time, he feels at peace. He's here. He's alive. Maybe that's all that matters. Every now and then he can't help glancing over at Diane, but she never looks away from the twinkling sky. He finds himself wondering what she's thinking about, wondering if she knows what else he wants to say, and yet somehow he doesn't have to wonder. You know, if we were on a TV show or in a movie or even a play, this would be the part in the story where I'd say something so painfully sappy it would make the audience collectively awe to a downright grating degree. Oh yeah? What would you say? I'd say, how unbelievably lucky I am to know you, to have known you, and that even if this is the last time we ever talk to each other, I'll always cherish you and our friendship and the time we shared together. I'll always be thankful that you never gave up on me, that you helped me realize that I can and should push myself to be better. And what would I say? You'd smirk kind of shyly and simply say, "You're welcome." And then I'd end my sentimental speech by saying something I've always wished I could tell you, something I thought I was never capable of or deserving of, something that has ultimately taught me to no longer be selfish, but humble and grateful and happy. And then before I actually said it, I realized it's probably best to not say it at all, but instead let it be implied, because audiences love that shit. They do. He turns his eyes back to the sky in all of its serene beauty, letting the stars do the rest of the talking. Alright, that was Nothing Unsaid. And a couple of things that I just have to point this out, because not the same hearing it as it is actually reading it. With that last scene with BoJack and Diane, that conversation didn't actually happen. I have it in italics. It's just kind of like one of the many conversations that could have happened as they're just sitting there, just looking up at the stars, thinking, reflecting, just being there together. So just one of those meta things, and that unspoken, grateful for you. And just wanted to do that whole little thing with Maud and Todd because they're so adorable. It's just one interpretation of an extra layer of motivation for Todd and his way of thanking BoJack, of just him leading him away from the party, just to be on the beach, have that moment of peace, and him thanking him for introducing him to Maud, even because he doesn't get the credit for it, which is good though, but that's just one interpretation of it. And then the whole thing with Henrietta and Hollyhock. Since we don't see Henrietta in the show at all, outside of Beatrice's memories and just her face blocked out. So that's just one thing of how, in her own way, Hollyhock is also grateful for BoJack. And really, when you think about it, how all of us as fans of this exceptional show are grateful for BoJack in our own way as well. So on behalf of all of the fans, thank you, BoJack Horseman. And with that, that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, well, shall we go? Yes, let's go. I'll be discussing Waiting for Godot. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.